My adult sister started talking like a toddler everywhere. My mom kept defending her, but I refused to play along and forced her to speak normally. After a stranger called her out, she finally admitted why she did it. I'm 34 and my sister Elena, who is 27, has always been rather infantile, but over the last year, she's really amped up her baby talk to an absolutely exhausting level. I suspect it started because she was dating a guy who seemed to like it, but now it's every other sentence from her. It's gotten to the point of near constant nonsense. Her baby talk is not just occasional cooping. She'll show up at my place and ask, "Can I put some yeast in the fouage?" when she means juice in the fridge. She's seen my 6-month-old cry and bellow load. "Oh no, don't cry." Or she'll ask, "Do you have any in the frizz?" Which of course means ice in the freezer. This goes on endlessly and truly tests my patience. My older sister S35 and I have developed our own way of coping with this. We act clueless and make Elena repeat herself in proper English until we understand her. Our mother, who is baby Elena all her life, does absolutely nothing. In fact, she'll translate Elena's nonsense for and me, even though we know exactly what she means. We just refuse to play along or act like it's normal behavior for a grown woman. Yesterday was my birthday, and Elena came over. She had cranked the toddler talk up to 100, possibly thinking she was being hilarious or adorable, but I was having none of it. We had a giant cookie instead of a cake, which everyone was excited for, except Atlanta, who took it as an opportunity to go completely overboard. Later in the evening, she handed my husband a plate and piped up, "Can't I have a sleeve of the cake of Cokes?" It took all my self-control not to lose it right there and hit my breaking point. I told her flat out to cut it out with a nonsense talk and use real words. She protested immediately, saying, "But it's cute," to which I replied, "No, it's not cute, and I'm asking you to stop." She instantly got defensive and threw back, "I can do whatever I want, and nobody can tell me what to do." My mom, of course, jumped in right away to side with Elena. Trying a different angle, I firmly stated that if she absolutely insisted on using these made-up words, the least she could do was not say them in front of my 6-month-old. I want my child to learn proper words. If I'm 100% honest, that was more an excuse than my real and I just desperately want her to speak normally, but I said it. Elena immediately accused Isa the same thing, saying, "Well, Estes has made up words with her daughter." The only example she scrabbled for was tummer instead of tummy, which is hardly the same as what she does. I told her that what S does with her 2-year-old is irrelevant because this is about me asking her to stop in my own house. Maybe not crucial to the point, but worth mentioning. When my husband finally came back with a cake, I was still irritated. I refused to hand over a slice to Elena until she asked in normal adult English. She glared daggers at me, but very sulky, "You'd comply." Now I'm left wondering, was I the jerk for both refusing the cookie cake until she asked properly and for laying down the law about the baby talk in the first place? Yes. Elena is technically an adult entitled to behave as she wants, but the constant baby language from a 27-year-old drives me absolutely insane, especially when she dials it up for attention. Naturally, my mother thought I was in the wrong, but Est, who wasn't there, but heard later, fully agreed with me, as did my husband. I'm tempted to just ban the toddler talk altogether around me. But honestly, after dealing with this level of annoyance, I can't tell if I'm just being unreasonable from how much it grates on me. Can't resist mentioning that. Anyway, my mom came over today and we had a chance to talk. She admitted right away that it is annoying as hell, but explained that Elena is actively working on learning how to stand up for herself, and mom wanted to support that, even if it makes things awkward for the rest of us sometimes. I get it, but I told her, pick your battles. There's a time and a place. Mom agreed with me and said she'd talk to Elena about it one-on-one. She felt that if she'd back me up in the moment, Elena would have gotten defensive and tuned out everything, which is probably true. I also mentioned that a few people had pointed out that it is my house and I have every right to ask her to stop. Mom agreed again and reassured me she'd speak to Elena privately. So, that's where things stand right now. I'm planning to talk with Aston and we both agree it's time for a serious, straightforward conversation with Elena. Treat her like an adult and be a bit kinder about the whole thing. That feels like the best approach moving forward. Update 2. Est and I have been feeling a huge sense of vindication lately given everything that's happened for ages. We've been told by our mom that we're too hard on poor Elena and it's always frustrated me. It's reached this strange point where Est and I don't tease Elena like we rip into each other, which is honestly a shame considering we're English, and our primary love language is the artful use of insults and sarcasm. But I digress. Saturday evening rolled around. Another family get-together. Atlanta and my mom coming over for our usual round of Jackbox games. That's when my opportunity finally came. Atlanta asked me with a slightly smug, unblinking stare if I liked her new jump. I stared back at her already anticipating something was up and asked, "You're what?" My mom immediately jumps in, clarifying, she means her jumper, before Elena interrupts her, defiantly declaring, "She knows what I mean. I can say jump if I like." Clearly, Elena had decided she was going to double down on this whole thing, but this time, I was prepared. I could practically hear the voices from my Reddit research in my ear, egging me on. I asked her if she could please stop with the nonsense words. She immediately shot back, insisting it's something all millennials do, that I needed to get over it. Then she claimed I do it too. Dragging out Prosec. I flat out disagreed and then told her truthfully that I'd been Googling about this quirk of hers, which I disguised as some normal research, but really I'd been consulting a bunch of strangers and hearing their wild thoughts. I let slip that to one theory. Reed suggested maybe she'd started doing it because she's no longer the youngest in the family. That really set her off. She fired back, all affronted, explaining that she'd been doing it long before the kids came along. I wasn't buying it and pointed out that she had ramped it up much more recently, and to my immense satisfaction, my mom agreed with me. Elena looked absolutely livid, spluttering and denying up and down that it was the case, so I pressed on. I said that in all my Google, let's be honest, Reddit research, I'd seen people say that some folks use this kind of language as a comfort thing when they are anxious, and asked Elena if that's what was going on. At that, she seemed incredibly irritated, accusing me of trying to diagnose her or make it into some weird issue. Truthfully, I think her goal was to be cute and funny, and I was probably just ruining her moment with my misplaced concern. She glared at me and declared that I was the weird one for making a big deal out of this, let alone Googling it. And I told her quite honestly that the reason I cared so much was simply that she's far too old to be talking like some kind of Yoda baby. I wrapped things up by saying that if this wasn't a reaction to anxiety, then could she please stop because it properly annoys me, and I'd like to actually enjoy spending time with her. And there you have it. Thanks, Reddit, for giving me exactly the right words and the courage to finally put it all out there. Update 3. The universe, in its glorious sense of humor, decided to hand me the perfect controlled setting for our next round. Vieira Pub Manager Sunday roasted our logo, the King's Arms. Low stakes, neutral ground, good gravy. A and her husband came with her daughter. Mom brought Elena. We took the big table by the fireplace. Baby was in its pram, giving everyone his most judgmental stare. Atlanta swanned up to the bar before any of us could intercept and sang out, "Can I get a little prosecco and a chicky roasty?" The barman didn't even blink. He just put his elbows on the wood and said in that flat London tone that can strip paint, "I'm not serving you if you're that far gone. Love," you could see it, hate her. Her face did this rapid cycle from bewildered to mortified to furious. Mom immediately started bristling like a cat, which never helps. I got there just as Elena was gearing up to explain herself in the same nonsense. I said, "Elena, say it normally." She snapped, "I am," which, no, the barman, bless him, simply pointed at her mouth. And then, this is the part that surprised me. She did it. She took this visible breath, squared her shoulders, and said very clearly, "Could I have a glass of Prosecco? And the chicken roast, please." He nodded, cowered, handed over. No saga. No duel at dawn. She brought it back to the table with her jaw set and eyes watery, and man doing the deaf glare at me that says, "How dare you force my baby to pronounce consonants?" Est, who is a terrible person, and my favorite, said into her napkin, "Well done on passing your oral GCIC at the bar." Elena did not laugh, but she also didn't speak for a few minutes. Which heavenly silence. I was bracing for the inevitable blow-up when a little boy at the next table had one of those sudden eruptions of tears. Proper howling, arms flailing, peas flying. His mom did the heroic British thing of pretending not to notice the entire pub watching. Elena's eyes pinged over like a magpie. Before I could say anything, she was up and over with her Prosecco, crouching by the pram. She launched into it. "Anuo, don't cray your peas, go wee-wee down the tea." The mom's head snapped up. I watched the exact moment she clocked that Elena was 27 and not in fact an 18-month-old in a Zar hair jumper. Her face went flinty. "Are you taking the make out of my son?" Everything froze. S hand shot out and grabbed my sleeve like we were on a roller coaster. My brain went, "Here we are." Then I went over and said, "She isn't. She just talks like that sometimes." Which did not weirdly soothe. The boy went quiet mid-wail to observe the adults. Elena's face did the defensive quiver again, and then again. She changed gears. She softened her whole posture, looked the M dead in the eye, and in a completely normal voice said, "I'm so sorry. I meant to distract him, not make it worse. You're doing amazing, by the way. Would he like to see my watch? It makes a silly beep." She pressed the button. The watch beeped. The boy hiccubled. Crisis averted. Mom of the year unclenched. The world resumed spinning. I caught Elena's eye as we sat back down. She looked embarrassed, yes, but also a bit relieved. "You can ew it when you want to," I said, not unkindly. She stared at her roast and went, "Don't start." So, I didn't. We ate. We actually had a decent chat about whether gravy is a beverage husband thinks it is. He's wrong. Baby tried parsnip and looked personally betrayed. It wasn't until later, washing up back at hours, that my phone buzzed with a 3-minute voice note from Atlanta. I braced. It started normal, which was promising. "I'm at home. I didn't want to talk in front of Mom." Then there was a pause, and she say, all in a rush, "You were right about one thing. Not the youngest thing. The other thing. It started with Cal, her ex." I leaned on the counter and just listened. He used to say it made me soft and, I don't know, he liked it. It made me feel like I was something sweet. I liked feeling like that because I don't usually. And then, when we broke up, I kept doing it because it was like, I don't want to sound pathetic. It felt like an outfit. If I didn't have it on, I felt boring. And also, another pause. "You hate it. And winding you up is like my Olympic sport." I laughed alone in the kitchen because of course it is. But then her voice went tight around the edges. "And I think I do it when I'm nervous and I don't know what to say and I'm trying to be funny. It's not a kink or whatever. It's me. But also, I did hear that man say I sounded drunk and it made my stomach drop." She exhaled so loudly it fuzzed the mic. "I don't want to be that girl. I don't want people to think I'm stupid. I'm not. I know I'm not. The next day, Elena came over with a quality street tin under her arm like a peace offering. She'd stuck masking tape on the lid and written "no nonsense" in Sharpie, which for some reason nearly made me cry. "I'm bringing it to yours," and asks, she said 50 pence for her every stupid word. One quid if I do a sentence. Mom watched this whole exchange like she was witnessing a hostage negotiation. I looked at her and said, "This only works if you don't feed it." She rolled her eyes but nodded. "I'll bring change," she added, which is the closest thing to accountability my mother has ever offered. We test drove the tan the night over Jackbox. It was bizarrely wholesome. Elena kept catching herself mid-syllable and slapping her own wrist like a pantomime school. "Pass the water," she'd say, Tame trembling in front of her like she was hovering over the big red button. Baby lay on the playmat, kicking out a giraffe and contributing his own commentary of "baba da." Every time Elena made it through an entire sentence without embellishment, Est would clap like a seal, and I'd hand over a Haribo like we were clicker training a very pretty Labrador. When she slipped and said, "Nana 4 banana" out of pure reflex, she groaned, dug 2 coins out, dumped them in with a clatter, and then narrated, in perfect diction, "I hate this." We all laughed. She smiled. Our real one. The only proper wobble came when she FaceTimed me the next morning on her walk to work and accidentally sang, "Look at the doggo," then physically grimaced and said quite sternly, "Dog. It's a dog." "Hello, dog." The owner glanced up, gave her the universal British dog walker nod, and said, "All right." Elena beamed like she'd won a medal. After she hung up, she texted, "I think I use it like armor. Can I be soft without it?" I wrote back, "You can't be whatever you want without it." It felt nauseatingly earnest to send. But there it is. Because the world refuses to let me have a tidy ending. Mom came by later to drop off a pan and very casually mentioned that Atlanta's manager had a word with her last week about tone on client calls. No one told me this before. Atlanta hadn't said a thing. Apparently, nothing catastrophic. Just a note that she comes off flippant sometimes. I did not say no kidding. I did text Elena and ask if she wanted help practicing 4 calls and she said yes and also don't be smug. I replied with a hang because I'm me. So that's where we are. There's a tin on my bookshelf full of coins that chime every time my sister remembers she is in fact an adult human woman with a fully formed palette of vowels. There is an agreement that in my house and around my son, the words will be the boring normal ones. There's also a tiny surprising tenderness I didn't expect in the way she now occasionally says perfectly plain thanks and means it. And because she is still Atlanta, she left me a final voice note this afternoon, reading the shipping forecast in the most crisply enunciated BBC presenter voice I've ever heard. Lundy fast, Irish Sea, moderate or rough, mainly fair. It was so ridiculous and so on the nose that I stood in my kitchen and laughed until the baby laughed just because I was. Then in the quiet after, I realized I'd heard her go an entire day without asking for E from the phrase. Progress apparently sounds like small coins and clear consonants. Update 4. Atlanta came over on Tuesday with a laptop, a stack of printouts highlighted like she was revising for an exam, and the tan under her arm like a talisman. "Mock me," she said, dumping everything on my table. The approval. She'd been asked to lead a client read out of work. 20 minutes, 5 slides, 1 live demo. The very idea made her go pink at the collarbones. We parked the baby on his mat with a handful of rings, pointed the pram at her like a tiny judgment cannon and began. The first run-through was fine. She did that thing where you can't hear the smile in your voice even when your face is in neutral, and I kept lifting a finger every time she whiffled towards a docky or clicky. She'd do a tiny WCH, press her lips together, and repeat the word properly like she was diffusing a bomb. At one point, she self-muted, said "for God's sake" under her breath, put 50 pence into the tin with the air of a woman paying a parking ticket, and then carried on like nothing had happened. By the third go, she hit a rhythm clean warm without being securin'. She finished hailed and the baby clapped exactly twice in that serious accountant way he has. She grinned at him like he was the CEO. The real call got moved forward an hour because of people in transit, and all at once the house turned into backstage at a school play. FaceTime to say break a leg and also don't say break a waggy because she is helpful like that. Mom texted, "Good luck darling X," and then followed it up with "say it how you like. Don't let her bully you," which I read out loud, and then put my phone in the fruit bowl just so I wouldn't hurl it into the garden. Elena sat down, squared her shoulders, opened Teams, and there they'd all were. 3 rectangles of expensive hair and a fourth of a man in a car who definitely should not have been dialing in while doing 50 on the A40. "Thanks everyone for making the time," she said, and I swear to you, she had a grown-up voice. Round clear, not a cartoon in sight. Halfway through slide 2 as she started to say repo, and I saw her feel the curved edge of reporting with the tip of her tongue. She chose not to. She sailed past. When the demo glitched for half a second, she didn't do that panicky gavel. She just said, "Bear with me," clicked twice and waited. At the very end, the senior woman, the one with the hair, said, "That was one of the most digestible run-throughs we've had." And I watched Sina do this little swallow like she'd just been given a knighthood and was trying not to burp. When she hung up, she went limp like a puppet whose strings had gone slack. Then her manager that's the tone. "Do you fancy co? Presenting next week?" She stared at the message so long I thought she'd frozen. Then she turned to me with this impossible mixture of terror and glee and said very quietly, "I did not say a single stupid thing." The tame got a celebratory shake. No coins moved. That night she sent me a screenshot of a DM from Cal. Of course, he crawled out of the woodwork. He'd viewed her story of the tin mass tape Sharpie. I don't know why she insists on cataloging our private shames for the internet and written, "Miss your sweet voice X." My stomach did a slow roll. I started composing a paragraph in my head full of all the things I have wanted to say to him for 2 years. I didn't have to send any of it. She'd voice noted back already. Christ Frost, don't message me again. I don't owe you softness. Then she blocked him. I lay on the sofa listening to it twice just to marinate in the pure adultness. I didn't reply straight away because I was too busy having feelings, which is gross because the universe cannot resist a theme. 2 days later, her office asked her to record the new voicemail tree. I found this out because she turned up in mine with a carrier bag of wine gums and a printed script that said things like, "Press 1 for accounts and your call is important to us," and announced, "I'm the voice of Hargreaves and Bell now." We put a blanket over the clothes horse to make a studio and balanced her phone on a stack of cookbooks. My baby, who absolutely refused to nap anywhere useful when he was a newborn, fell asleep like a Victorian orphan at the sound of "Please hold." We recorded 3 takes of "We value your patience" because she kept wanting to put a wink in it. On the 4th, she nailed it. When she sent it off, her boss wrote back, "Love the tone, professional. Still you." She read that twice and then said almost to herself, "Still me." Like she was trying it on. The only genuine wobble all week happened in the queue at Sainsbury's local. There was a golden retriever tied to the bike rack being so spectacularly golden retriever that it was basically an advert for itself. Elena's mouth opened on a reflex I could have set my watch by. "Look at the..." She caught my eye. You could see the war. She shut her mouth, then opened it again, and with audible effort went dog. The owner turned at that exact moment and said without irony, "Good girl," to the dog. I nearly swallowed my tongue laughing. Atlanta elbowed me, mortally offended, and then laughed too. We walked home with a watermelon and our dignity. On Saturday, there was a street fair down the high street, the sort with bunting and a plant swap and a man in a bowler hat selling very serious cheese. It rained for 5 minutes because it is the law. We ended up in the church hall where the YN set up a tea and cake situation next to a secondhand book stall and a table of battered board games. There was also bizarrely a make-your-own radio show booth run by the community station. Basically a trestle table with 2 mics and someone's nephew in a beanie. "We're collecting little voice snippets from locals," said the nephew. Like read the weather. Read an event listing. Say hello to your nan. Est naturally shoved Atlanta forwards with both hands. "You the shipping forecast," she hissed. It spiraled from there. The beanie boy put headphones on her and pointed at a script. Saturday FT Day Special. Elena sat, lifted her chin, and switched it on. I watched her slot into the BBC register she's been mucking about with on voice notes for weeks. Except this time, it wasn't a joke. "Good afternoon from Street Mary's Hall," she read. "Bouncy castles, moderate, increasing, with a risk of drizzle. Tea, hotcakes, plentiful, mainly fair." The beanie boy looked up from his laptop with real awe. When she finished, an older lady at the books table, the sort of woman whose eyebrows do your homework for you, called out, "Ooh, she's got a lovely voice." Atlanta went pink in a way I haven't seen since she was 12, and someone told her she was good at netball. Then they asked her to draw the raffle because the vicar had a sore throat. She did it in the same calm, clear tone, and half the room leaned in like she was reading them a bedtime story. The woman who won the chutney basket blew her a kiss. Mom, who had been browsing a pile of paperbacks like she was about to uncover a first edition of Wuthering Heights behind a copy of Shopaholic and Baby, materialized at my shoulder just in time to hear the eyebrow lady say, "You should be on the radio." Mom's face did this complicated series of micro-expressions. Pride, relief, suspicion that this was all my scheme. On the walk home, she tried for a casual, "See, she can do it when she wants," and I, in an act of maturity I would like applauded by the nation, simply nodded. Elena for once didn't do the stick. "It's not that I didn't want to," she said. It was harder out loud than in my head. Then, almost laughing at herself, I sounded drunk. We all thought about the bar at the King's Arms and didn't say his name. Because we are incapable of not adding a game mechanic to our family life, the tin has had a growth spurt. Est has made a laminated tally sheet titled Mouth Practice, like we're in couples therapy for a mouth. There are little gold stars acres involved. Mom tried to peel them all off and stake them on Elena's face like it was a primary school assembly. Elena batted her hands away and said very calmly, "Mom, stop. Not babyish, not wobbly, just a boundary. Laid down like a placemat." Mom huffed, did a fine, and then 5 minutes later brought a Lantet tea without being asked. Progress apparently also looks like sugar you didn't pour yourself. And because the gods love a callback. Sunday night, I put the baby down and came back to find 2 voice notes. The first was Elena reading in the exact serious radio voice from the hall, an email she drafted to her manager asking to be put on more client F-facing work. I can do it. She'd ring. I'd like to. The second was her singing Happy Birthday, normal wobbly human 4S little one who turns 3 next week. There was a catch in her voice on Dear Rosie that made me sit down on the stairs and just listen. No sparkle, no sugar rim, no cartoon, soft without armor. The next morning, her office phone line picked up with, "Thank you for calling Hargreaves and Bell," and it was my sister, not the version bent into cube, not the one that tiptoes around consonants. Just Atlanta coming out of tiny speakers in someone's hand sounding like someone you'd believe. I stowed in my kitchen, put the call on speaker next to the basil plant, and let the baby listen. He said, "Da," which is deeply unhelpful to my ego, and then patted the table like a drum. I told him, "That's your auntie," and Elena through the phone said, "Please hold," which for once I am very happy to do. Update 5. I got a text from Atlanta at 6:42 a.m. on Thursday that just said, Can you come to Street Mary's hole now? PLS emergency. Which is the exact syntax she uses for, I lost my keys and I've accidentally volunteered for something. I stuck the baby in the pram in his pajamas, yelled a sentence about fish fingers of my husband, and legged. The Y table was gone. In its place, there was a folding screen and a nest of wire like someone had tipped out a drawer of snake. Community radio nephew Beanie, confidence of youth, was flapping. Our travel. Newsperson's coid, he said, as if that explained why there was gaffer tape spelling no drinks by the desk on the floor in capitals. We've got 5 minutes. She can do it. She's got that voice. He pointed at Lena like she was emergency glass. You break to get a fire extinguisher. They put a studio together out of a card table, a battered mixing desk with DMO label, saying things like Fader 2 equals you and a Christmas tree of tiny leads, and 2 microphones with foam hats that smelled faintly of custard creams. On a wall, a laminated sheet, Mic Live means shut up. Another posted in bro underlined 3 times. Do not swear. Atlanta was already in the chair, headphones on, eyes wide, doing the breathing you do when you're about to either cry or run the 800 May. I tapped his watch. You've got bulletin at the top of the hour and then travel. Keep it tight. If you don't know, skip. He handed her a printout. Local headlines, a calf opening, a road closure with 3 different pronunciations baked in like landmines. He slid a fader. The red light went on. I thought my spine might leave my body. Good evening, she said, and it was the voice from the church hall and the voicemail tree and something else layered under it. Calm. It's 6:45. You're listening to Street Mary's Community Radio. Here are your headlines. She read about the library late opening like she was wrapping it in brown paper and string. She said Bicester correctly. I held my breath for that one. When she hit the bit about the afferund form and laying 2 remaining clothes near the junction with the Affer Bath Road, she didn't do the nervous laugh. She just laid it down like track. At one point she said per duck and then flattened it out mid-syllable into producers told me, we've got Midlands weather next. And Beanie gave a tiny involuntary pump of the fist like he'd scored a golden 5. Aside between travel and whether she read the sort of community announcement that always makes me feel like I live in a postcard, the allotment sale, the choir, or open rehearsal, the fact that the chess club has scones now and you can hear it. This barely their smile. That was not a trick, not candy. Floss, just pleasure. The phone dinged. Beanie turned the screen so we could see a text from a number ending in 73. Whoever's on tonight has a lovely voice. Made me feel less murderous. About the ring road another. That dog that's always outside Sainsbury's is called Millie. The roads are clear on Street Peters Way. Thanks, voice lady. Elena Reed. The weather mainly fair. Some showers hit her time to the second and took her headphones off with her hand shaking. Beanie took them out of her hands like they were an egg. You've got it, he said, which is the least poetic thing I've ever heard and somehow made me want to hug him. He asked if she'd do the Sunday lunchtime slot, because our usual guy's at our wedding, and she nodded like someone being proposed to. We celebrated by going to the King S Arms because, of course we did. It's S round the corner and they know how to pour a Guinness without sighing. The barman, the one with a paint stripper voice, clocked us, looked at Atlanta and did the sort of nod men do to other men and respect after a bar fight. What will it be? He said no irony. No arched eyebrow. Proco, please, she said, and he brought it without commentary. As he set it down, he went almost shy. Heard you on the radio just now on my smoke. Didn't sound drunk. If there were Oscars's 4 apologies delivered sideways, he'd have won. Elena blinked at him like he'd spoken Welsh, then said simply, thanks. My heart did a weird lurching thing that could be early onset, maternal pride, or indigestion. Sauter turned 3 on Saturday, which meant our living room turned into a soft play guillotine of primary colors and small sticky hands. We had 12 toddlers, 4 aunties, 2 granddads, 1 over-ambitious balloon arch, and my mother in a cardigan with pockets that could conceal a jammed tart. At some point, mid-chaos, Elena sat cross-legged on the rug and read Rosie L. Babies in a voice that was warm and present and had exactly 3 separate owls in it. The kids drifted in like seaweed until they were a trough of faces. She did a daft voice for the twig that goes snap and an evened after one further winged, but when one of the adults ambled over and said, give us your cute voice, Elena, do the thing, she didn't even look up. No, she said, still turning the page. Listen. And the child next to her went without a shred of irony. Shh. Mom hovered like a wasp with a tray of sausage rolls and made a face I have never seen before. Pride without the urge to claim credit. When the cake came out, Rosie tried to scoop the icing with both hands. Atlanta deadbanned. It's a cake, not grout, in that BBC voice, and even I laughed because we can't have a day without a subplot. We ran into Cal on the high street later doing the casual amble that is actually a loop designed to be accidental. He did a hey stranger like he was a man in a film who owns a yacht. He glanced at the pram Atlanta Elena at me, stacked his shoulders into charm po. Missed your sweet voice, he said for the benefit of an audience of 2 and a golden retriever called Millie. Elena tilted her head the way she does when she's measuring something and then clean his dental floss said, we're not doing that, and kept walking. No flones, no fireworks. He stood there like a human sandwich board that suddenly had nothing written on it. I did not high-five her because we are in public and we're not 12, but I thought it with my whole face. Work marched on. She did the co-present the following week, and then, in a plot twist no one ordered but which arrived caught, was asked to leave the queue and because the expensive hair woman had to dash to another call. You could see the old muscle twitch, the place where she'd giggle or sugar something flicker and go still. That's a great question, she said, then actually answered it. And when a man in an open neck shirt tried to interrupt her twice, she held up a hand and said, "Let me finish that thought," like she had purchased silence from a shop and was now unwrapping it. After her manager sent her a calendar invite titled Development Chat, which historically would have made her sweat through a blazer, it was wildly to talk about her taking on client tone training for the junior team. She sent me a screenshot of 3 bullet points and a line of keyboard smash. Then a voice note that was just her laughing into her sleeve. The tin, by the way, now weighs as much as a small dog. We sat on the floor and counted it out one afternoon while the baby did the prehistoric squawk at the kettle. There was 47 pounds sterling 50 in there, which felt ceremonial. "Where does it go?" Elena asked. Serious, suddenly. Suggested a speech therapy charity. I said community radio needed new foam hats that didn't smell like biscuit ghosts. We split it half to a local lit charity that sends volunteers into schools to listen to kids read half to the station. Beanie sent a photo of 2 new pop shields and a message that said in all caps, "We are a professional outfit now." And then P. Millie says hi, which I choose to believe was dictated by the dog. M. Spiritual leader of Team Indulge has also whispered it had a micro-evolution. She turned up on Sunday with an Aldi back and said was no preamble. "I told your aunt I won't translate for Atlanta anymore in the tone you use when you've given up sugar for Lent. She can talk for herself." Then immediately, "Do you want a Viennese whirl? Progress is not linear. It is a biscuit." Sunday lunchtime, I put the baby down and tuned into Street Marys because apparently I am now the sort of person who makes ta for a radio show. Atlanta did the lunchtime slot with his steadily you could build a shelf on. She read an interview with a man who keeps bees on his roof and made it sound like the most important thing that had ever happened. At the end, she said, "And finally, if you lost a scarf at the FT, it's blue. It's in the vicer's office. Please claim it or Audrey will start wearing it." And I could hear her smile right through the speaker gap like light under a door. After it finished, my house was so quiet. I could hear the small clink of the tin settling on the bookshelf. A message came through from Atlanta. Quote of her at the little desk. Headphones on, the red light off. The post-it that said, "Do not swear now," with a tiny gold star stuck on it. Underneath, she'd written, "I didn't. That night." The baby, one of those random midnight areas that make you doubt every choice you've ever made. I walked in, small furnace on my shoulder, kitchen to hall to kitchen, radiator to basil plant. My phone face down on the counter. Bust. I put it on speaker and let the whole music from Hard Reeves and Bell wash over us. Warm, dull, mercifully predictable. "Thank you for your patience," said my sister in my kitchen. "Your call is important to us." The baby's breath evened out against my collarbone. I stood there in the dim and listened to that voice draw a neat line around the edges of the room. When she came back on for the next segment and said, "Line clear," I realized it was for now at least. And that is astonishingly, stupidly, wonderfully enough.